my name is Tara Bentley, and I'm the Executive Director for the Indiana Association of Home Educators, otherwise known as the IAHE.
And my name is Courtney Nalen. I am a homeschooling mom of two who also works full-time outside of my home and a volunteer with the IAHE.
Together, we're your co-hosts for Season 2 of the Homeschool Indiana podcast. We'll be here each week sharing information to help you homeschool, keep you updated on what you need to know, and have some fun along the way. So let's get started. Hi everyone, Tara Bentley here. Courtney is not with me today, but I have a very special guest I cannot wait for you guys to get to know. Her name is Christy-Faith. Welcome, Christy.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here today.
I am so excited. Let me tell everybody just a little bit about you. If they don't know, you are a social media powerhouse with over 350,000 followers. I bet that number's even higher now. Millions of video views. You motivate moms to take the homeschooling leap, remain steadfast, and revitalize their purpose. And you are all of that. You don't disappoint, I got to tell you. So I have loved getting to know you over the past year. It's hard to believe it's only been about a year.
I know. It's wild. Well, when I find the people that I like, I keep them. I grab them and I hold on to them. And that's you. You're one of them.
Well, back at you. So I have to say, it says powerhouse, but that is an understatement. You are an absolute dynamo. You lead with such passion and energy for what you do. I just love it. You are so real and vulnerable. And I think that is what has endeared you to homeschool moms across the country and beyond.
Oh, that is so kind. Something that I'm really passionate about, just coming from a background in education, is I hold two things equal, and that is the deschooling component of the mindset shifts that we need to make when we decide to homeschool our kiddos, which I know we'll talk about in a couple minutes here. So there's that high level thinking of mindset shifting. But then something that I'm equally committed to is, okay, how does that shift now apply to our actual lives? How do I actually do these things that I believe in? And it's harder to do that. And I'm deeply committed to it. It's why I spend so much time on all of my talks and all of that, because it's like, okay, here's that big picture. Now, how can I ensure that you're going to walk away today with actual tangible things that you can try, do at home to figure out how to homeschool your kiddos with this new perspective. And so that's what I'm so excited. Thank you for inviting me to Indiana. I'm thrilled to be coming and keynoting. That's so exciting. Yeah. I can't wait to share with the families, and we can go over maybe some of the talks that we're going to be doing. I'm really excited about the talk on special needs. I think that that is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I've read thousands of IEPs. If you don't know what that is, that's an individualized educational plan back when I was an educator. And I think that particularly homeschooling a kiddo who doesn't learn within the box is vitally important. And there's some things that are really important to incorporate in our homeschools when we have our special diverse learners. And so I'm so encouraged. It's fresh in my mind because I've been fine tuning that one the past couple of days, making sure it's all polished up. So, but anyway, I cannot wait to come.
Well, I am so excited. You have such energy that you bring to everything that you do. And I'm really excited because here in Indiana, we are going to be the first homeschool conference that you get to speak at.
Woohoo!
It is amazing. And, I've been in the homeschool world. So we started homeschooling in 2001, which, you know what, in some circles, that still makes me a newbie. I just got to say,
yeah.
we've got some amazing veterans in our world. But you have been a breath of fresh air. You burst onto the scene around the time of the pandemic, sharing homeschool encouragement with families. And I have to say, when you first burst onto the scene, it was, like, who is this? Who is this woman? Is she real? Can't we trust her?
He's a TikToker, right?
He's a TikToker because, and especially it's funny that we're recording in the week of TikTok being one of the major things in the news, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just want you to share a little bit of your history so I know more about you now. And I appreciate it so much, where you've come from. You're a professional educator, and then you kind of cross the big line. You cross the big line into home education.
Mhm.
And I'd just love to have you share about that.
Yeah. Well, I talk about this in the first chapter of my book. I've been in education for over 20 years, supporting both the public and private school system. Our entire career was built on it. My husband and I founded a boutique learning center and consulting firm. We advised A-listers and billionaires on the educational choices for their kids. What did that involve? That involved tutoring, test prep, remediation, college counseling. We got these kiddos into Ivies, all of that. We also ran a homeschool pod out of our center. But interestingly, I don't talk a lot about that pod because although it was great, it was a lot of child athletes and actors. And so that was really about getting them through the school day as fast as possible, using accredited resources so that they could get to their auditions or, fly across the world to get to the next surfing competition. We had an ice skater, a surfer, an actor. And so, but we did, for many years, we hired credentialed teachers and ran a homeschool pod out of our center. And although we loved it for so many years, we really felt deep in our core that we were helping kids and families. And it came from a really great place too. I don't feel bad, although there started to be a little bit of an identity crisis, which I'll go into in just a second. But we ran our center for many years, and I started to observe the kiddos. So you got to remember, our clientele, these people could afford anything. If their kid needed a tutor, they got it. An SAT tutor, they got it. If they needed, to a quarterback coach, they got it, right? And so you would think that when you could have everything, when you can provide everything for your kiddos, more than half of our students were in very elite private schools. I'm talking like $60,000 a year elementary schools, highly, highly elite in the Los Angeles area. And wouldn't you think that if you could provide that the outcomes would be amazing? Wouldn't you think? Right?
Right.
But what we saw what the statistics show. This crisis in mental health. We saw very concerning behaviors. I could count on one hand kids who actually loved learning, hardly any. It was a very results-driven, type A, achievement-oriented environment. Now, I do realize a lot of that was our clientele, but actually it's not really unique. Our entire system, which is something I'm going to go to in the keynote address that I'm giving in Indiana, is that the way the system is set up, it's achievement-oriented that really just kills a love of learning. We ran that center for many years. Scott and I didn't even have our first child due to infertility until we were already married 11 years. And so we had a lot of years of just us working together. We were kind of known as a little bit of like the power couple in the Palisades. Interestingly enough, our center burnt down. When was the fire? It was like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So all of the we were in the heart of the Palisades, right near the village. And the person who bought the company from us, we are still in a great relationship with her. And she texted us a picture of the building. It was a 4-story brick building that's just completely in rubble. So that's
Wow.
really sad. It was a little bit of a end of a chapter because it's not like we could go back and visit it if we wanted to. Because usually when we go back to LA, we do visit her and visit the center, and we can't anymore. But long story short, we started to have our own family. We had our son, and I thought, man, how am I going to educate this kiddo? Because we see under the hood. Like we taught 50 different schools, elite, like the best of the best schools, both public and private. And it's really not that impressive. The kids aren't happy. They hate learning. And I asked myself a really dangerous question. I asked myself, which I always put myself in these situations. I asked myself, what is an education?
Mhm.
And that was just the question that ended everything, because I started to research what homeschooling is, what homeschooling pedagogies or educational pedagogies are. Some people call them styles. There are 9 different homeschooling styles. You know some of them. Your listeners know classical, Charlotte Mason, Montessori, Waldorf, unschooling, right? There's 9 of those different styles, traditional. And so what was fascinating to me was that these even existed. Now, keep in mind, I've been in education my entire career. And I'm just now, when I go to my first homeschool conference, I'm learning about the different pedagogies. And then, Tara, what's so crazy is I was drawn to a history session at the very first conference that I went to. a session on history because one of my degrees is in history. I have a master's degree in history. And I thought, this will be so fun, right? How do you teach, history and homeschooling? Well, I sat down, and as soon as this woman opened her mouth, my mouth dropped. I could not believe what she was saying. It was the first time I had ever heard the term living book. She was from the more of the Charlotte Mason philosophy, and the thought of educating a child in history without a textbook was just so mind-boggling to me. I
Right.
couldn't believe it, but it made sense deep to my core. It just immediately felt in alignment with how humans are wired. And that just got the ball rolling with everything. Like, what else now? What else can I uncover? And I got home from that conference and flew home, sat down with Scott, and I said, I think we got to homeschool these kids. And he was fully on board from the get-go. And a lot of people think that, oh, Christy was an educator, so that's why it wasn't that hard of a leap. Actually, it's really hard. If you've been an educator, supporting or in the system, I was a teacher as well, and you move to homeschooling, you feel like a fish out of water. It is really scary. And actually, the deschooling that needs to happen for us teachers is far more severe than a mom educator where that's not her background, because we were taught, scaffolding, this, that, this, what an education needs to be. And so you have to undo so much. But that was kind of what got the ball rolling. And I got to tell you, Tara, that this led to a complete, almost a deconstruction, or we can call it an awakening regarding the educational system, right? We hear a lot of people saying, like, I'm deconstructing Christianity. No. But we did deconstruct the educational system. And me as a historian, I started to look at the history of the educational system, and I'm like, ooh, yikes, that's not pretty. And wow, okay, it's working exactly how it was intended to work. No wonder kids are miserable. No wonder they hate learning. Education has been boiled down to basically vocation training, and it's really not only killing a love of learning, but I really feel like it's killing childhood. So overall, to end my story, and I hope I hit on the things that you wanted me to talk about. You can follow up later, but overall, my message to parents across America is, this is not what a childhood should be. This is not what a childhood should be. And we can redeem our kids' childhood. But not only that, it can be a win-win, because not only can we absolutely give them a better education when we actually know what an education is first,
Right.
but we can also give them a childhood, and maybe the childhood that we didn't have. So that's what's just so exciting about being a voice in the homeschooling space and having like this awakening moment for us. And it led us to selling our company and moving states. We now live in Colorado because when we initially moved here, it was with the intention of more affordable living so that I could stay home and home educate my 4 children in a state that had some more freedoms. Colorado is not the freest state, but
Oh,
it is
that's
more
us in Indiana. We're the freest. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. More than Utah. Utah's pretty free. But anyway, so it led us to moving states. And then after that is when Christy-Faith happened on TikTok of all places. And it's because I'm mouthy, and that works well on TikTok.
Well, it's so funny because, when you first started coming onto the scene, as I said, obviously these shorts, these reels, people would share them and I'd get these little glimpses of you, but there's so much more. There's so much more to you that goes so much deeper. And so some of our listeners, if that's all they've ever seen of you, right?
Yeah. Oh, you don't even know. Yeah. Because you got to keep in mind, I'm a homeschool evangelist. And so like if you were just to watch my reels or my TikToks, you wouldn't know, for example, how much I love Jesus, what a strong Christian we are as a family. That's an intentional choice that my channels aren't that. And it's because my calling is a homeschool evangelist. And then once you come into the fold, I nurture you, I educate you, I help deschool you. But, I've gotten criticism for, everyone has an opinion on what your channel should be. It's like, go start your own channel and do that, right? Like this, you think this is easy? I'm dealing with the trolls all day and not, it doesn't bother me. I honestly have not lost a wink of sleep over what other people think my channel should be, because it's right where it's supposed to be. And this is definitely there are days where it feels bigger than me. And I think to myself, oh no, what did I get myself into? This is insane. But at the same time, I just cling to the Lord because he put me here and it's on purpose. And I just need to keep obeying and following. So if you've only seen my social media channels, you are missing out on a piece because you don't get to hear my faith-based content. And I
Right.
love talking about Jesus and encouraging mamas. And I get to do that in person when I go to the States, which is really great.
So, and one of the things that I love about your story too is the reason you jumped into TikTok was because this was in the pandemic, you were spending time on it, you were looking at things, but you only saw one side being represented on homeschooling. And it wasn't the pretty side, it was a lot of negativity. And you went in there to make a change. You went onto TikTok to be a positive voice. And I think that is so important because for a lot of us, it's another social media platform. You can only have so much capacity for all the things, but you set out to make a change.
Yeah, I was frustrated with two things. Everyone complaining about homeschooling, but also I was really frustrated with some of the damaging advice that is out there given to homeschooling parents regarding like ignoring 50 years of research on literacy, for example, and early intervention and how important that is. There are some messages in the homeschooling space that are highly concerning to me. And so that also compelled me. And as well, the mamas going on there and just complaining that, of homeschooling during the pandemic. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? You get to spend more time with your kiddos. This is fabulous. What an incredible opportunity you have. And yeah, so one day I was already in makeup because we had been to church and I got really fired up about something, which is, you wouldn't know anything about that, Tara.
No, not at all.
Yeah. I got fired up about something and I did a voiceover for Reese Witherspoon in Legally Blonde. And when I look back at it, it was not that great, right? But it went viral overnight. I couldn't eat for 6 weeks. And so often people go into this influencer thing intentionally. That was not me. It was like, whoops, what did I do? And then my friends and family were like, whoa, 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 whoa. What if this is what you're supposed to do? And then it was conversations in the background that it was very much a group decision that to be a voice on TikTok first. Instagram didn't come till.
Wow. And then along the way, in the midst of all of this, you are tapped to write a book. Is that correct? How that happened?
Yeah. So again, the same story with this I thought it was a joke. So a publisher reached out to me. They found me on TikTok. One of the acquisitions editors reached out to me. I thought it was a joke because you get lots of spam when you do what I do and half the things you ignore and, incredible opportunity for this. And it's like, no, it's an awful opportunity. And so I thought it was a joke. And then I looked up the publisher, which is Wiley. And I was like, whoa, wait, they're real. And so we set up a meeting. And so usually, I don't know if your listeners know this, but usually someone sets out to be an author and then they make a proposal and then they get a book agent and then the agent shops your proposal around. No. They're like, great, let's do it. Send us your proposal. I was like, okay. Googling, how do you write a book proposal? That's how it went down. It was nuts. And
you couldn't get a better stamp of approval because you went straight to the OG, right? You went straight to Dr. Brian Ray.
Yes.
To say, hey, will you endorse my book?
Yeah, I said, hey, I leaned on a lot of your research. And he was traveling back from Africa. I could not believe he even responded to my email because in my mind, he's this majorly famous dude that's doing all the peer-reviewed research on homeschooling. I use so much of his research in my book, so he was a natural choice. But I didn't think he would actually reply. And he did. And then we got on Zooms with him, me and Scott, and we just really connected. What a sweet man. It's an honor to know him. It's an honor to have had him write the foreword to my book. And yeah, so it's been quite a wild ride. And then now I'm a speaker.
Well, you did the work. And so I'm so glad, that you will be coming. And so I don't want to spoil anything, right? We don't want to leak out what, everything you're going to say. But your keynote especially, I'm really excited about, and it is called The Education Revolution: Why Our Children Deserve More Than Institutionalized Schooling. So I'm excited about this. I feel like we talk about it in many ways in everything that we do as an organization, but what is it you think is most important for families to know?
I think that if I was to distill it down to probably the most important message, it's understanding that the school system was never designed for the best interest of children, ever. No one sat around a boardroom table saying, things just aren't working. How can we just do better for kids? No, that's not what went down. That's not how it went down. And so I think that when you understand the roots of it, and a lot of people do know the history, when you understand the roots of it and the purpose of our compulsory education system in America, you realize how it truly is designed to kill a love of learning and to rob children from their families. And I know that's a bold statement, but being gone 7 hours a day for 13 years straight is a lot. And it's a lot to undo if your kid is in the system. And that's why we have families that are struggling so very much. And the age segregation of the schools is not in the best interest of child development, for example, putting kids into classrooms based on their age. There are studies that show that diversity with ages is a healthier way to learn. Think like One Room Schoolhouse from Little House on the Prairie. We know that this is better. We know that giving out grades is extremely demotivating, yet we do it anyway, because how else are you going to grade or know or be able to evaluate huge numbers of children? Well, the only way is through some sort of a system where you are grading them. And then anybody who doesn't fit in the exact same way that system is teaching kids to learn, they're all of a sudden labeled. And now that child has a diagnosis and a special need just because of that they don't fit into the way the system has said that a child should be learning. Now we know this is what's so wild to me, Tara, is like all this is backed with research. We know there are different learning styles. We know there are different intelligences. We know that the best childhood is one where there is a secure attachment with the parent. We have a major issue with peer orientation in our society. In fact, in the book, Hold On to Your Kids, Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld actually call it a disorder. Their words, not mine. Don't come after me. But I'm going to shout it from the rooftops because it's true. People think they praise kids for being independent. That's not a praise. I mean, a capable child, I praise my kids for being capable. But praising a child for being independent it's not in alignment with child development. They need a healthy attachment with their parents through the teen years. It looks different. No, they're not sitting on your lap and snuggling. Your teenage boy isn't doing that per se, but still a healthy attachment with your teenage boy is very important. And so the school system knew, the founders of our compulsory education system knew that if they could grab the minds of the children for 7 hours a day, they could also get their hearts, and they could get them thinking differently than their parents, and they could get them to be obedient citizens. And so that's kind of with the keynote, we're going to be pulling all that together, but then also the hope of homeschooling and how we can really just reclaim what an education is, what a childhood is, what healthy psychological development for a child looks like. And it really, the best possible environment for that is homeschooling. So I'm so excited about the keynote. I hope I didn't give away too much.
No, I think it's amazing. And I think that because, as I'm listening to you, and so we're recording this in mid-January, and we're going to get it out pretty soon. And people may be listening to us later, right? So if you're listening to this later, just to kind of let you know where we are, half of my brain is thinking through all of the things that you're saying. And from that perspective of thinking about all the bills that we are watching here in Indiana, that other state leaders are watching, of how these institutions who are decreased enrollment, right? They're not happy that they're losing so many kiddos to home education, and the ways that they're fighting to get kids back, the ways that they want to, reach over into our freedom and draw these kids back in many ways, whether it's with money, whether it's with increased regulation, whether it's with lowering compulsory school age. Like they're not going to be happy until they can keep pulling back into their slice of the pie. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is frightening. And I think at the end of the day, we need to realize that these are our children. They don't belong to the government. And I know there are people that don't homeschool well. I know there are homeschooled graduates who had very awful experiences. Luckily, most of the homeschool graduates that I come across who had bad experiences, including educational neglect, which I do think is real. I do think that exists. I also am a believer that every child has a right to an education. I think that every child should be literate. So, but most of the people that I come across who had really bad experiences, they understand that it was their parents. It wasn't the institution of homeschooling. And interestingly, I was over word count in my book. And so I had to take out an entire chapter. And in that chapter, I go over the philosophical arguments against homeschooling. And I go into that, homeschooling is not the problem. It's people that are the problem that abuse freedoms, just like we can drink alcohol. We can have the freedom of drinking alcohol, and we can also drink that alcohol and get behind a car. The car behind the wheel of a car. The car is not the problem. It's the person abusing the freedom that is the problem. And most people I come across really do understand that. In fact, a lot of people I come across are homeschooling their own children, and they're in a way redeeming their negative experiences, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because it's too easy for people to say there are these cases, and we know they're there. Like, we know that. We know they exist. But guess what? We only have to look at the literacy rates out of public education,
Mhm.
right? To realize, again, people, flawed systems, but
Yeah.
the public school is not going to do better. The odds are, right, the public education is not going to do better.
No, in fact, the statistics show that a child is more likely to experience abuse if they are a child going through the system.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Most homeschooling parents are extremely vigilant and really high quality homeschoolers and parents. And they're pulling their kids from a system because it's failing their kids. And then people just like to take the clickbait stories here and there and then extrapolate that to stereotypes about us. And that's always going to be there. And so we need people, you know what we need, Tara? We need the homeschoolers who are trained in logic and rhetoric to make sure that, honestly, because the rest of society isn't thinking anymore, ultimately to understand what freedom means. What does it mean to be in a free society? Because ultimately that is the choice. And who has the authority over our children? Do our children belong to us, or do our children belong to the government? And that really is ultimately, when you boil it down, the people that want to regulate homeschooling and regulate parents and control the curriculum that we're buying, they believe they have rights to our children.
Absolutely. And that really is the core
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
very issue. And so, one of the questions I had said to you that we would discuss, I think you already answered it actually, but we know that we have parents who have critics in their life about homeschooling and whether or not they have either the right to homeschool, whether or not they're doing it well. And I think you've kind of already addressed like the answer to those critics, but what else would you say?
So there's a couple things. I think it's very real. If you are someone listening right now and maybe you have a family member, maybe your own parent or an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor who just thinks you're a weirdo and what are you doing and you're going to ruin your kids and they're not going to be socialized, they're not going to be prepared for real life. Trust me, we've heard it, right? We've heard all the things. The first thing that I think is really important to have in your toolbox is a why statement. More than just an abstract think. More than just you sitting down with a cup of coffee and just thinking, what's my why? Why am I homeschooling? I actually think it's worth doing the work and writing one out. In my community, Thrive Homeschool community, as soon as someone joins, I welcome them personally with a direct message. And I say, whatever you do within the first week of joining this community, please take the Finding Your Why workshop. Because at the end of that 45 minutes, you have a why statement that you can then memorize. You don't need Thrive to have a why statement. You can do this on your own. I just make it easier and it's done in 45 minutes. So don't think that this is like a sales pitch for Thrive. It's not. My point is that having that why statement that you memorized that is very personal to you, it can be incredibly disarming to your critics. So if you're saying, the school system just wasn't meeting my child's needs who has special needs, and we really wanted the freedom to go at his or her own pace and yada, yada, yada. When it's personal like that and you have it memorized, and when you're at Thanksgiving or a party, you can say that, what are they going to say to that? Like,
Right.
That's dumb. No, it's so personal. And you know what's fascinating to me is for the people who put in the work to make a why statement, most critics agree with it. They agree. And so that's one easy way to be disarming. Another thing about critics is really kind of categorize who your critic is. If this is Uncle Joe that you see only on Thanksgiving once a year, you do not need to have a deep conversation. You can make a joke, deflect, right? And just move on with your day. I would save the more heartfelt conversations for those people who deep in your heart deeply care about your children and you. Those are the people worth the investment to try to deschool. So I have a chapter in my book on deschooling. And the third thing that I think is so important for people to remember who are homeschooling is they are always going to be judged by people who aren't deschooled. Right? They're always going to be judged. People are always going to say like, so-and-so doesn't know his times tables, or they don't know their states and capitals. When we're back here saying, no, but my kid actually can formulate an argument. And, he's studying Latin and he can read the Iliad, right? They don't see it because they're blinded by what they think an education is. And we don't buy into it anymore. We don't agree. We don't think that's an education. We don't think that memorizing everything by Friday to regurgitate it on a test just to forget it over the weekend, we don't think that's an education, but other people still do. So it's just going to be something that we have to learn to deal with and just let them think that. Let them think what they want to think about you and invest in the people that you think have the potential of ultimately being your cheerleaders down on the line. And invest in those people is the big advice. And it's hard, but I got to say, Tara, have you grown as a human? I've grown a lot with not just homeschooling. We're the only people who homeschool in my neighborhood. And I know they look at us and we're in Colorado, which is a heavy sports environment. Everyone's in competitive sports or club sports, or even if it's dance, it's competitive dance and it's competitive cheer and it's all this. And we're just not on that train. And even though we have great athletes, we're not going to, it's in philosophy with how we view, we're not going to let one child's sports dictate our entire family's experience in childhood. No shade to people that do make that decision, but this is just, we have 4 kids. And so it's our decision not to do that. But just being okay with being misunderstood is a superpower. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And, when you talk about, identifying your why and writing it down, I think it's so important to look at it every couple of years because your why will change too. And so my girls were 7 years apart. We started in my oldest daughter's 7th grade year. And so, why we pulled the trigger in the middle of her education was very different to why we finished it, very different to why we did with my youngest. And I will very often talk about, going from fear to faith, because we had some fear-based decisions,
Yes.
When we made the decision in the beginning, and it was going to be temporary, totally temporary. I was not going to be here forever.
Look at you now. You're running a whole organization.
The whole thing. Yes.
That's on you, right, Tara?
Yeah. So we're going to grow and our children will grow. And as we go forward, we want to always look at our why again. I would tell families sometimes, I'm like, not only just write it, print it, put it on the refrigerator, because there will be that day when, you're crying, they're crying.
Mm-hmm.
Husband may join in. That's my husband would always say he would cry. Or Math would bring tears, and some of them would be our daughters because some of them were his. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Pretty handy. So, okay. So one final question before we call it quits here. And so what are just a couple, because I know we're running a little over than we normally do, but what are just a couple of the top qualities that you think a homeschool parent needs to be successful? Because I bet it's not a degree. I bet it's not a degree in education.
No, in fact, that's probably a drawback. In thinking about this, I think you're going to think this is crazy, but the more I think about it, the more I convince myself. I think a parent having emotional regulation is vital.
Oh.
I think it's vital in parenting in general, but particularly with homeschooling, because things don't play out how we envisioned. And maybe we have a learner who's really struggling and we start to panic. And it's truthfully, the pressure is on us because we have taken the responsibility of educating our children. For us, it's the long haul. It's to 12th grade, of course. And so, it's on us, and we can get scared and our kids can melt down. And I think that in homeschooling and in parenting, a parent having the skills and somewhat mastery as best as we can over our own emotional regulation is really vital so that we can stay calm and stay the course. And ultimately, when kids are little, we have to co-regulate. And then when they are older, hopefully they learn to regulate themselves. But I know that's a little bit, it sounds, your listeners are probably like, that's weird. Well, come to the conference and hear more about this, because I will convince you that emotional regulation kind of is the key to learning and parenting. And actually, research is starting to come in to support this regarding not just homeschooling, but students in general in terms of academic success. And with that, I think a growth mindset that we're not going to do this perfectly. We're doing this along with our kids. And again, we're going to fail at things, and then modeling how to fail beautifully, right? And having that growth mindset. I know that term is overused, but I think when a term gets overused, we start to forget what it really means. And so getting granular into what that looks like specifically in our homeschools, how it applies specifically to us in ways where it doesn't apply to other parents who have their kids in school, I think is really vital. And those are two things. And then a third one that I have is, I think, a commitment to building skills. So one thing I've learned as I've been coaching parents all along the way, at our center, I trained all of our teachers. And so I have been training teachers since my early teens, believe it or not, because I was a boss back then. And now I exclusively train homeschool moms. Is what I see over and over again is what builds our confidence, what's going to have us battle that self-doubt that keeps us up at night, is a commitment to building our own skills in our homeschooling and learning as much as possible, which that's what's a beautiful thing about you guys offering conferences to homeschooling parents, where we can come and get equipped and build our skills, so that, because competence is what builds confidence. So think about the things that you are really good at. You have confidence in those things. So when I see a mom really struggling with self-doubt, underneath that, I see a mom who could use skill building and growth and learning more about homeschooling so that we can build up that confidence. And that's what really lights my fire. I love meeting the moms in person. I love mentoring the parents. And in Thrive, we have live office hours, and half the time all of us are crying. People say you can't have connection online, and you really can. We've achieved it, but it truly is nothing like in person. And so that's why going to your homeschooling conference, particularly your state conference, because your state is who is supporting your homeschooling freedoms in the Capitol building. And so your ticket is directly supporting your freedoms to homeschool. And that's why I love coming to the States and drawing as many people as I can to you guys, so that we can keep our homeschooling freedoms that are actually pretty tenuous.
Well, they absolutely are. I don't know if anyone's going to get to hear this in the first 24 to 48 hours, because hopefully people will be listening this weekend too. Our Capitol Day is coming up. And so you may be listening to this after our Capitol Day, but vigilance matters, participation matters, and who you support matters. So yeah, because we know that we have challenges to our freedom constantly, and it's all over. But anyway, we are so grateful for you, Christy. I just want to point to everyone. I hope they come hear you. I think you're speaking 5 times. So hopefully they're going to follow you around and pick up your book, Homeschool Rising, as well. And I hope they listen to your podcast too, which is wonderful. You do Facebook Live as well, where parents can just pop in, get their questions answered, and you're a dynamo. I think that's where I started. So that's where I'm going to finish.
So sweet. See, the word I would choose is I'm obnoxious, because I'm everywhere. Yeah. We multi-stream. We're on all the platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We multi-stream, and also go to the Indiana website, because if you're curious what talks I am giving, there is a video right on that conference homepage, isn't there? And You can
Yeah.
start to
Well, they
plan
can
your
link you.
visit.
Yeah. We have your page with your sessions and your video that you did, which was just stellar. So much fun. So when we ask a speaker, hey, would you mind sending us a little video? No one knocks it out of the park the way Christy-Faith knocks it out of the park with that video. So you're wonderful. So we will see you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person, and we will get to spend some time together, but I know that you will be getting and giving lots of encouragement, lots of hugs, and I can't wait to see you there.
Me too. It's going to be a blast.